Hey guys, today I'll be reading second chapter of Genesis, verses 8 through 14. So far, just to give you an introduction of what I've read so far, um, this is the first chapter of Genesis, which was the creation of the world, and the first 7 verses of the second chapter, which uh, it focused on the seventh day of creation when God rested, and the other and the beginning of the story of the Garden of Eden. So when the stream wells up and waters the earth, and the creation of man, when the Lord breathed life into Adam. So let's get started. I'll read it, and if I got any comments on it, I'll be sure to voice them. The Lord God planted a garden in Eden, in the east, and placed there the man whom he had formed. Out of the ground the Lord God made grow every tree that was delightful to look at and good for food, with the tree of life in the middle of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. A river rises in Eden to water the garden. Beyond there it divides and becomes 4 branches. The name of the first is the Pishon. It is the one that winds through the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold. The gold of that land is good. Bdellium and lapis lazuli are also there. The name of the second river is the Gihon. It is the one that winds all through the land of Cush. The name of the third river is the Tigris. It is the one that flows east of Ashur. The fourth river is the Euphrates. Alright, so it's a fairly straightforward passage. It mainly concerns the names of the rivers and where they are geographically. I believe the Bible does this mainly to cement its veracity, if that makes sense. To prove that it does speak of historical events. It's not merely a fantasy. So it sprinkles in these sorts of details. So, yeah, so it gives us geographical locations of rivers that come from Eden, or so it says. And and Eden is where the man whom he had formed. And well, this is where all the trees that were delightful, along with the tree of life, along with the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So it seems to me that all of these trees, if they're good, or at least it wouldn't be right if you would think that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is a bad tree whose fruits are bad, if all the other trees are good, if that makes sense. So like it doesn't seem, because we all know that when Adam and Eve ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they lost grace with God, right? But it wouldn't make sense for God to place a tree like the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the midst of all the other trees which are supposed to be good. So what purpose does it play? I'm unsure. Perhaps it merely serves as a temptation, perhaps to test. I don't know. It's something that Milton explores in his book Paradise Lost, but I wouldn't know why something like the tree of the knowledge of good and evil has a place in the Garden of Eden, considering that all the other trees are good, if that makes sense. It doesn't. That's always confused me. So yeah. So let me read the footnotes, and we'll see if it elucidates anything. So for verse 8, here's the footnote for that. Eden in the east. The place names in verses 8 through 14 are mostly derived from Mesopotamian geography. Eden may be the name of a region in southern Mesopotamia, modern Iraq. The term derived from the Sumerian word Eden, which means fertile plain. A similar sounding Hebrew word means delight, which may lie behind the Greek translation, the Lord God planted a paradise, or, in other words, a pleasure park, in Eden. It should be noted, however, that the garden was not intended as a paradise for the human race, but as a pleasure park for God. The man tended it for God. The story is not about paradise lost. So that's interesting. So this garden is meant for God as a place to wander and stroll about, and man is its tender. So for perhaps the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is good for God, rather than the humans who tend it. Perhaps it was only meant for God, and that's why it was found in the Garden of Eden, because what's good for God may be different than what's good for us. Perhaps because we're finite and God is infinite, but I don't know. But it's safe to say that we were forbidden from eating it, but we did anyway. But perhaps it was for God and not for us, and it's because of that He forbade us from eating it. I don't know. I don't think anybody knows, by the way. It's not something anybody will know. It's just conjecture. Trying to piece together. Okay, here's the footnote for verse 9. By the way, this is all from the New American Bible Revised Edition, so if you want to know where I got my footnotes from, it's from that. I also have to give credit to the authors of this book, or the editors, rather, for the footnotes. Alright. Verse 9. The second tree, the tree of life, is mentioned here and at the end of the story. It is identified with wisdom in several verses in Proverbs, where the pursuit of wisdom gives back to human beings the life that is made inaccessible to them in Genesis 3:24, when we were probably expelled from the garden. In the new creation described in the book of Revelation, the tree of life is once again made available to human beings. So that's interesting. We gain access to a tree, or rather the fruit of a tree that had been forbidden from us ever since the expulsion of Adam and Eve. What that means, I don't know. I don't know what it means that we have access to the tree of life or not, but perhaps that's what they refer to when they say you're in pursuit of everlasting life, perhaps? At least life in heaven with God. Perhaps that's what it's referring to. You're granted life with God rather than going to hell when you have access to the tree of life, and at least according to the Catholic doctrine, when you partake in the Paschal mystery and so on. Alright. Knowledge of good and evil. Here's the footnote. The meaning is disputed. According to some, it signifies moral autonomy, control over morality, symbolized by good and evil, which would be inappropriate for mere human beings. The phrase would thus mean refusal to accept the human condition and finite freedom that God gives them. According to others, it is more broadly the knowledge of what is helpful and harmful to humankind, suggesting that the attainment of adult experience and responsibility inevitably means the loss of a life of simple subordination to God. Well, both of those explanations deal with human experience rather than divine experience. Because if this is a pleasure park for God, then why would he plant a forbidden tree just to tempt humans if the tree served no other purpose? I suspect that it's a tree whose fruit is for God, and that's why he exclaims later in Genesis when, where is it? Well, he basically says, expel them so that they do not eat of the tree of life and become as us, become one of us, like a heavenly divine being, like one of the hosts of heaven, like the angels, whatever. So, yeah, I think that the tree of knowledge of good and evil is geared more towards God than for humans, and that its purpose doesn't align with ours. And that's why when we were disobedient, we had to be expelled. That's my take on it, though, but I'm just a simple man. I'm nothing but a sinner, as Sancho Panza always says. So what do I know? Alright. So, here's the footnote for verses 2:10 through 14. A river rises in Eden. The stream of water, mentioned in verse 6, the source of all water upon earth, comes to the surface in the garden of God and from there flows out over the entire earth. In comparable religious literature, the dwelling of God is the source of fertilizing waters. The four rivers represent universality, as in the phrase, the four corners of the earth. In a variety of passages, the waters that irrigate the earth arise in the temple or city of God. So perhaps the parallel here is not the temple or city, but a paradise, or no, a pleasure park of Eden. The place names in verses 11 through 14 are mainly from southern Mesopotamia, modern Iraq, where Mesopotamian literature placed the original Garden of God. The Tigris and the Euphrates, the two great rivers in that part of the world, both emptied into the Persian Gulf. Gihon is the modest stream issuing from Jerusalem, but is here regarded as one of the four great world rivers and linked to Mesopotamia, for Cush here seems to be the territory of the Kassites, a people of Mesopotamia, as in Genesis 10:8. The word Pishon is otherwise unknown, but is probably formed in imitation of Gihon. Havilah seems, according to Genesis 10:7 and 1 Chronicles 1:9, to be in Cush in southern Mesopotamia, though other locations have been suggested. So this whole footnote just seems to describe the location of the river, of where they actually are in modern geographical terms. And it's not all that important, but it helps place where we think Eden might have been. So who knows? What I wanted to comment on, though, is the gold portion of that. I like how it says where there is gold and the gold of that land is good. As though gold... Well, I suppose you could have fool's gold, in which the gold wouldn't be good. It would be fake. But one would assume that if you had gold, it would be good regardless of its quality, I guess. But you have better quality gold and less and worse quality gold, I suppose. So it makes sense. I don't know. I just thought it was a little funny that it says, oh, they had gold and it was good. You know? I mean, one would presuppose, oh, gold is always good. But maybe that's because we all like money so much. But alright, I'll leave it there. Goodbye, y'all. Have a good one.